I'm Graham,
And I'm Corinne.
and we are.
2Talented. We're supposed to say it together. You're supposed to keep saying 2Talented.
Really? Oh, sorry. I thought we were taking turns.
No, you're supposed to start, and I'm supposed to chime in at the 2 Talented. We're never gonna get this correct.
It's
All
gonna
right, we
become
might get
like the defining feature of the show is not being able to nail the two talented. It's like we're
yeah.
not talented enough to do the two
Uh-oh.
talented.
Yes, we'll get there
Yeah, we'll
eventually
get there.
if we listen to our own podcast.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. Well, yes, today is another round that we're going to do is kind of the talent behind Two Talented. Last week we did Corinne and had kind of her history, and we'll call it origin story if you all are comic book readers. But it kind of, I think, was a really cool snapshot into kind of the experience that Corinne brings to kind of this podcast and such. And today we'll do me, and hopefully I can try to have sort of as good a story as Corinne had last week.
You have a very good story. So I'm going to ask you most of the questions, and we're going to learn about your professional background and how you got to where you're at today. But first of all, how's everything going? It is the Tuesday of race week for both of us.
Yeah, yeah. You're doing the 100K at Javelina near Phoenix, and I'm doing the 100 mile. We've got a whole crew of people flying down with us to kind of get us around, and it's for me, it'll be 5 loops in the desert, and super like a very typical desert scene. So big saguaro cactuses. There's lots of desert animals. There's some kind of small mountains out there. And so it's a really pretty place. And I didn't grow up near the desert. I grew up kind of in the southeast, so it feels really kind of foreign and special to be able to go race there. How about
Yeah,
you?
it's kind of exotic feeling. Yeah, I've been at Javelina like every year for the last 4 or 5 years, 5 years, I think, except maybe once. But it's a really special race, and it is a party in the desert, as they say. A lot of costumes, a lot of crazy antics. And I'm really excited for you to get your first 100-mile finish and buckle. You're going to make it happen after multiple.
I'm gonna make it happen. Fourth time's the charm.
Yeah.
It's the only distance I haven't been able to do well yet. So yeah, I'm excited to get this one done. I've got a lot of confidence going into this one. I think I'm in a pretty good spot for it.
Yeah. I agree. That's going to be exciting to see. If anyone is interested in hearing more about Javelina, the Ultra Uncovered podcast, the other podcast I do, we're republishing 2 episodes we did last year. One kind of about the race with some special guests, and then one that was a recap of my 100 mile from last year. So you could go check those out if you want to learn more about the race in, particular or specifically. But all right. So today, how about business wise, Graham? What's going on? How are things going?
Yeah, it I've had a little bit of a rough patch in the last week or so. I had a number of deals that I had kind of in process, and they all, as of today, have kind of fallen apart. So I'm picking myself back up and dusting off, and I've got a couple job orders that I'm working on that are kind of in the construction business, like project manager and superintendent. For a civil construction firm that I'm working on. So I'm going to really dial up efforts and try to get candidates kind of into both of those roles in the next week, as well as kind of gear back up into some heavy business development and kind of get some things going. So yeah, I mean the job market's very slow, as anyone listens to this probably knows already. So it's kind of that factoring in, and I just need some good luck. That's a numbers game, so I just need to put numbers on the board, and something will happen eventually.
Yeah, well, one thing about you is that you've been in this industry and this job type of work for long enough that most people get burnt out on it in a couple years, and you've been doing it for like, I don't know, 16, what, 15, 16, 10, 15,
No, it's
maybe
like
longer,
yeah, it's 18 years.
18 years. So you're extremely resilient. And the number of times that I've actually, heard you tell me like, oh, this fell through or this candidate or this or that. And then I'm always just like, I'd be devastated and like curled up in my bed for a week. And you're just like, But it's fine. We're just gonna move on, and so like that persistence, I want you to also remember it during your 100 miler.
Yeah,
This is funny.
absolutely. Well, and I think it's an interesting thing that you bring up because it's something that when I was running Ring the Springs 100K, which is in Colorado Springs, it was on my mind. That was like the first week I opened my business and then went and ran a race, a really hard, hot one in the mountains. And there were some points during that race where it was hard, and I kind of thought to myself, well, if you can't do this, do you think you can really, do your own business? And it was definitely a motivator. And I think I'm going to have some of that same carry through into this race, kind of thinking through like, hey, you're building a business right now. You need to be able to finish what you start. So I think that's very much that kind of dovetails into kind of both the running and the starting my own business.
Like they can motivate one another, each other, one another.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
absolutely.
Okay, so along those lines, like tell us a little bit about your professional background and how you originally got into recruiting because you did not do it from the get-go. So start at the beginning of your career and then tell us how you evolved into getting into the recruiting field.
Sure. So in the very beginning of my career, I came out of college and wasn't sure what I wanted to do exactly, but I knew where I wanted to be. So I wanted to be in Denver. So I was able to find a job selling building products for a large building product manufacturer. So going out to lumber yards and meeting with builders and all this, different kind of work selling like composite decking and siding. So I did that for a year, and then I got promoted to Atlanta, which at the time was the largest housing market in the United States. It might still be. And I did it for about a year and a half down there. We had kind of gotten together at that point. You would come with me. We got engaged out there, and when we got married, I kind of pretty quickly thereafter was like, you know what I'm doing is not as what I want to be doing. I think for the longer term. And you had gotten into technology recruiting. And you were doing what I thought was pretty interesting kind of things. You were getting to talk to lots of candidates about jobs and talking to clients about candidates and interview preps and all that. And I thought that sounded pretty interesting. So, friend of actually your family's, Phil, made an introduction to a guy who was working for one of the largest staffing firms in the U.S. and interviewed a couple times with him. I really hit it off. So he hired me, and I worked kind of in their finance and accounting group doing direct hire placement. And I did it. I started in 2007. About a year and a half later, the bottom fell out in the 2008 meltdown, and I had to kind of like going back to resilience. I had to really kind of struggle my way through that because our team ended up being a fairly large team to a very small team because everybody got laid off. So trying to keep my job and still figure my way through this. I was able to kind of do that. And then coming out of that, there was just a lot less recruiters in the market, and I'd been doing it long enough to be good at it. And so when the market came back, I really started doing very well.
Yeah, so it was I remember because I was realizing when I worked at Matrix, which we talked about in the last episode, that there was like this split desk thing where there were salespeople and then there were recruiters. And I
Yeah.
realized, oh, there's salespeople within the recruiting industry. And like you've been doing sales and you really like doing sales. It's a different type of sales. You're not selling a product, you're selling a service to clients. But I thought you would be really good at it. And I remember telling you, like, I think, this fits your skill set and, we wanted to try to get back to Colorado and we weren't sure you'd be able to do that. We'd be able to do that if you stayed in the outside sales type roles.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. Way to fill in the gaps because I'd kind of forgotten a little bit of that. So yeah, absolutely.
So, okay. So then you spent a number of years working for some of the big agencies too, or a big agency in particular. But you focused on both like finance and accounting. And then after maybe 9 or 10 years, you switched into IT staffing,
Yeah.
specifically
Yep.
as
Exactly.
the specialization, the of yeah, the area that you specialized in. So, like, talk a little bit about like why you changed focus areas, and then like how is it different recruiting finance and accounting people and IT people?
Yeah. So I made that change deliberately. So I had the company I was working with had me go out to San Francisco to basically restart a fairly struggling finance and accounting division for that market. They'd never kind of gotten out of the 2008 crash with that team. So I was brought in to really kind of get that team kind of together, hire a number of people, really kind of set the path and direction. And then after about a year or so, I wasn't quite as aligned as they had changed some leadership, and I wasn't as aligned with the new leadership as I wanted to be. So I wanted to go back to Denver, and my old boss in Denver said, "Yes, I have a role. I don't know if it's going to be a forever role, but it's kind of strategic selling into our largest accounts." So I did that for a period of time, knowing it was kind of be a placeholder. But I had told him I had a high level of interest in getting into the technology side of the business. It was different enough. I felt like it would be new and fresh and get me motivated. So when they had a role there to kind of manage the Denver technology team, I kind of jumped at it. And yeah, so I mean, it was a pretty big change. It's not necessarily like the people personality wise aren't necessarily that different. A lot of times you find accounting and finance people can be somewhat introverted, with a number of exceptions. Technology is the same way. Depending on the skill set. I have met a lot of project managers who are pretty outgoing and they have to be to drive projects along. But if we're talking about software developers, they're going to be more introverted. So that type of personality I was pretty used to, but it's some of the, lingo in tech. Tech has a lot more lingo that changes and moves year to year, whereas finance and accounting was pretty static. I mean, there can be new softwares that get introduced to that industry, but like a staff accountant's kind of a staff accountant. So like looking at a staff accountant today, it's kind of doing the same kind of work. Whereas if I'm looking at a software developer today versus 2015, they're likely using a completely different language that I would have never heard of in 2015 because it didn't exist. Some of the like React JS, which is not new, but it didn't exist in 2015 or it didn't exist much. Or some of the newer languages, Node.js, some of the kind of more common new languages just didn't exist back then. So to stay up on the technology, you constantly have to be talking to people about it. What's changing? What are you looking for? What kind of candidates are talking about in terms of technology? So that's really the big difference between, seems like, those two industries. And there's some other things, but by and large, that's kind of the main difference.
And is there a difference also in, was it majority direct placement? And when we say direct placement, it means I find the person, they get hired as a full-time employee by the company, and I get paid a fee for making that placement versus a contract hire, or a project hire, or like what you would call, what you guys have a term for them.
Like a contractor?
Well, yeah, but it's not.
Oh, so
Yep,
it falls into a couple different classes. It can be called contingent labor, or it can be called like staff augmentation. We're augmenting a
right.
project with a variety of contractors.
Yeah, yeah. I think contingent was what I was thinking of. So, like, was there more like contingent hiring in technology, or were you still doing like direct? Yeah, a combination. Because I don't really see people hiring finance and accounting individuals necessarily on a contract basis most of the time.
And they do. The businesses are kind of different.
Mhm.
So, from a staff or from a finance and accounting standpoint, a lot of the contractors that you end up placing on that side of the business are going to fall in just a couple of categories: AP, AR, payroll, maybe an office manager. There's a lot of like 3-month maternity leave contracts, or I've got someone on leave because they're really ill and I need a backfill. Those are usually the contractors you see. The other end of the spectrum of that is sometimes we'll see higher level consulting. So like even like a fractional CFO type contractor or consultant, they would be called at that point, or someone who's going to help, get someone to help them file their SEC filings, or a company's about to go public and they need someone to help them do the S1, but they will never need to do one of those again. So they need a consultant to help them do that. So in finance and accounting, it's very much the very lower rung of the market and then the very higher. Whereas I think in technology, contractors outside of, you don't see a lot of leadership consultants as much in the technology, but like you see a lot in the software development, mid-level, senior level software developers, DevOps, project managers, business analysts. It's much more friendly in the middle of the kind of industry, where you see a lot more contract there. So I don't know that there's more or less on either side. It's just kind of different.
And how about talk a little bit about the industries that you were supporting? You know, what kind of companies, like did was it a wide gamut of companies, or obviously at different times? And this is part of the, maybe you could speak to this a little bit, but how the ebb and flow of recruiting needs kind of follows, market demand based on the industries that are doing well economically or not at any given time.
Yeah. So I've worked from everything with Kaiser Permanente, which is one of the largest privately held companies in the world, probably, to SAP, HP, Wells Fargo. So a lot of really large, like when I was working for a large recruiting firm, that was a number of our clients. But then we also worked with a number of like local companies that were still pretty large, maybe like $1 billion in revenue. And then there have been times where I've worked with very small companies, startups and that types of things where they've gotten funding for the first time. They're going to need to hire maybe not their founding members, but maybe like next round. I've worked with a number of companies to kind of help them build that out. In regards to kind of the second part of your question, industries and the ebb and flow within it, I mean, it depends on really what's happening within the market, right? In 2008, if you were a company that focused on investment banking, banks, any of those types of things, you were dead. I mean, there was so much just churn in that market, and it was all negative churn where people were getting laid off unexpectedly, and it was a mess for that market. But at that time, we were finding some other types of companies. I was working with a manufacturing company. I was working with a financial services company that wasn't necessarily as exposed to some of the 2008 stuff that some of the other companies were. I'm trying to remember. It's been a long time since that time, but coming out of that, oil and gas got really big because there was a heavy demand for it. So I think paying attention to which companies are really thriving right now, and I think as we go into like today, I think one of the most challenging things is if you look at it, the magnificent seven in the stock market, right? I'm not going to try to remember all of them, but it's like Tesla and Netflix and Meta, Amazon. Apple, geez, that's like five. So
Microsoft.
there's a couple of, what's that?
Microsoft.
Yep, Microsoft I think is one as well.
Abu
So
Dhabi, or I mean, I might have to cut this out.
I didn't
uh,
hear what you said.
Alibaba.
No, it's got to be an American company for the
Oh,
magnificent
shoot, Facebook. No, that's Meta.
Meta. Yeah, I mean it's another very very well
Yeah,
known brand, but
Oracle.
like,
No.
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I can't remember. But if you look at those companies they're also doing layoffs right now.
Mhm.
Not in a huge way, but there's some level of that, and they're hiring. I was talking to another recruiter that supports the Apple as his main account. He said their hiring is very low right now.
Mhm.
So where even those companies are doing well stocks wise, they're still not hiring very much. So this is one of those times that you can't really look at the kind of market wins and go, oh yeah, I should chase this, because it's not necessarily telling you that. The only thing right now that seems to be in an okay place, with some exceptions, and it's been so since the last 3 years where the rest of the market's not been great, healthcare seems to have been pretty resilient. There's an aging population of baby boomers, and that's driving it. There's a lot of there's a lot going on in the healthcare market right now, so that's been driving some hiring within it. But outside of that's really the only market that I can think of right now as kind of an industry overall where it seems to be still pretty good. I mean, they say education and government. I don't know about the government now that some of the federal workers were laid off. Now it just don't. It's hard to know if it's still a good place to check. But yeah, so I think depending on the time and where you're at in the market, really looking for kind of signals on different companies that are hiring can be very helpful.
Yeah. What about like telecom and data center? Are those?
Yeah, data center is pretty hot right now because it's really necessary for AI. It requires a lot of compute power, and data center can provide that. And a lot of the NVIDIA chips that are used in a lot of the AI models, not AI models, but for AI models, that it requires a lot of data center space. So data center seems to be having a pretty big moment right now. I'll be curious to see if that continues over time. Telecom, I think it's a little hard to know with telecom in general. I know so telecom was one of my largest industries that I worked with in my last company, and I think it's fairly stable. I don't think they're growing a whole lot, but I think it's fairly stable. And if they're not in the data center space, they're just kind of chugging along like the rest of the market, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Magnificent Seven, Alphabet, which is Google,
There it is.
Amazon, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, Nvidia, and Tesla. Nvidia's
Nvidia, I forgot Nvidia's one.
now
That was the
one
one that I
Magnificent
missed.
Seven. Yeah. So cool. Okay. Um, so coming back to your career progression, what ultimately caused you to want to start your own agency?
I mean, even from the very beginning, I had thoughts about, I could do this for a little while for a company and then break off on my own. I've always been interested in owning my own business. Um, but then, for the next 16, 17 years, there was always something holding me back from it, right? We were trying to buy a house, so it wasn't a good time. Or, the stock market fell apart, so I was just kind of battening down the hatches trying to survive at a company. And then we had our first child, and we had our second child. And it's like all those things like make it difficult to really say, hey, I'm going to invest a lot of money in myself to be able to do this. And I think I got up to a point about 6 months ago where I kind of stopped having an excuse. Like, why wouldn't I now? I've got all this experience. I've got all these contacts. I'm got a pretty high level of expertise in a number of different markets, finance and accounting and technology, among a few other things too. So why wouldn't I give it a shot? And I think one of the things that, and hopefully this will not come back to bite me in terms of prediction, but one of the things that I found in coming out of the 2008, 2009 recession is in 2010 and 2011 were two of my all-time greatest years in the industry because the market came back, but a lot of the people who had been competitors of mine had left the market. So there was a lot less competition out there. So I made a bet that opening my company this year, I'd be able to, while it was slow, be able to get a lot of things off the ground, talk to a lot of managers, make introductions, really let people know that I'm out there. So when the market comes back, hopefully in 2026, that I'm able to capitalize on that business. And it was important to me that I was on my own, kind of building my own company when the market, kind of snapped back, because I felt like that could catapult me into being like a one-man band, or sometimes you help with some stuff, so we're a two-man band, and be able to grow it into a
Woman,
legitimate recruiting firm.
two person.
Two person. There you go. There you go. Sorry about that.
You're talented.
Two talented band.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. No, that so you have this long-term view on it and also have factored in like, yeah, like you're saying, betting on kind of where the market's going to go, which is really interesting, but doing everything in place. So talking a little bit more about kind of what you're doing to set up the business right now. I mean, you, unlike me, are very able to like super hyper focus on things, and you're very, very like time block project or planning like down to the minutes of your day, what you're going to do with every piece of time that you have in the day. So tell us a little bit about like talk about how you're also very very intrinsically motivated, I feel like, and always have been. So talk about how you set up that famous quote, like as an entrepreneur, or I know you don't like that term, but as a founder or a business owner, you trade working 8 hour, from 9 to 5 to working 24/7. So how do you reel that in, and kind of what have you learned in the process of structuring your day and the amount of things that you could try to take on, because there's so many.
Yeah. So I mean, I every Sunday, typically, like in the afternoon or evening, I'll just take a look at what the week has in terms of my set meetings. whether it's talking to candidates or talking to managers or talking to a partner that I'm using for something, who knows? But I'll kind of look through that and see how the week is going to flow. Obviously, I run a lot, so I also kind of put in when I think the best time to run that day would be. And then once I've got kind of those set pieces on there, then I kind of fill in with the things that I think are most important for this week. So, like, for example, for next week, the big theme, I'm going to have two themes for the week. I'm going to have one, I need to really heavily spend time on recruiting for the roles that I've got right now. They're really difficult. They're going to require a good chunk of time in the week to be able to make that happen. And then two, I really need to get back on not just the existing business development that I've done, because I've done a good bit so far, but I need to do more new business development. I need to talk to more people that I haven't connected with yet. So I'm going to do a project where I go back through a number of the people that I've messaged who are our first connections on LinkedIn and re-message them. Say, hey, I missed you the first time. I want to circle back and set a meeting now to be able to kind of round out the business development, because I don't think I quite have enough, I think, irons in the fire yet. And I think at some point I'll have to back off of that and say I've got too much going on. I don't have time for the business development. But right now, when I have the time is the time that I think I should be doing that. So it's really just kind of prioritizing at the beginning of each week. What can I do this week that's going to have the most impact over the next 3 to 6 months? And really be thinking in those terms, and then use that as kind of my guiding principle of like, okay, so if that's what I need to be doing, where am I going to fit that in time wise this week, and then block that out on Sunday night. And then some stuff changes. You get an interview that you have to prep somebody on, so you have to move, something where you expected to be doing something here and you have to change and whatever. So every day will change my schedule some, but the goal is to really have most of my day blocked out so I know what I should be doing at that moment.
So taking that further and kind of, or expanding it out, like, what do you think of the long term, say the 3 to 5 year plan for Stride staffing would look like? Or, and then I have a second part of what are you kind of hoping to achieve in, owning this business? So I guess start with what's some of the long term, what are some of your long term goals?
Like longest terms, like what am I hoping to achieve over the lifetime of the business,
No,
or three to five years?
start with the 3 to 5 years.
Sure. My kind of by the end of year three, I would really like to be doing, as a company, as a business, probably something like, I don't know, like 500 to three quarters of $1 million, 500,000 to 300 $3/4 million to be kind of building up enough business where I feel like now is a good time to hire someone. So in that time, I'd like to probably hire somebody, and probably a recruiter, because of all the business that I could be doing, either the recruiting side of the business or the selling side of the business. I enjoy the selling side more. I think I've got a little bit of a better knack for it, and if I have more time, I can get more jobs. So if I can kind of outsource the recruiting to somebody else, that'll be a goal. So that would be a goal in the next 3 years. Over the next 3 to 5, probably start to develop from a small little niche recruiting firm to something that's a little bigger and more recognized throughout the Denver market. That would be kind of my ideal goal. But building what's, instead of having just a small little firm or a two-person firm, have a legitimate company.
Nice. And then what are you overarchingly like really hoping to achieve with the business? Like, what would success when you decide to retire look like? It's a big question, but
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a sticker on my computer that the journey is the destination. I don't have like a true end goal of where I want to be. I don't think success to me is like putting a number out there. So like if I do 30 million in a year in the last year, that's success. I think success for me is going to be able to sustain this on an ongoing basis financially. Because I think for me, like if I'm able to figure it out financially, I'll want to keep doing it just naturally. So there's no real end goal in mind. The end goal will be to create something. I really want to create a business where I can, towards the end of it, step back and say, wow, look what I've been able to build. Look how many lives that I impact by creating this. Look how many people make their living from this company. Look how many companies that I'm able to support in their initiatives with hiring and getting their goals done. So I think that to me is the most important thing. Is and really having a reputation for, I know I can call strides, and they're going to get me someone fast, and they're going to get me someone good. Those are the two things that I think are the most important things that we're going to do. And then I think the last thing is I want people to say, I can trust those guys. They're not going to screw me over. They're not going to, show up with, a bad candidate, or they're not going to ghost me or leave me hanging on the candidate side. There's a right way and a wrong way to do this business. And there's so many times where I see recruiters do it the wrong way, ghost people, don't give feedback, all those things that, are like the important personal side of the business that can either make or break someone's day. You want to nail that stuff, and that's important that we'd be able to do. So that's what I'd like to grow this into.
Nice. Great answer. I agree.
I'm glad that you do.
Okay, so we want to end on something kind of fun. So I know you're a very, very devoted listener to the Founders Podcast, and
Yeah.
love that podcast. So tell everyone a couple of lessons or like some trends that you've taken away from all those episodes you've listened to that maybe you're wanting to bring into your own business.
Yeah. So, it's funny, like, after listening to, I think I've listened to like 350 of those episodes, almost every single one. So he has a theme. His name is David Senra. If you have an interest in founding a company and that type of thing, it's pretty fascinating. At least it was to me. But Charlie Munger has a lot of like soundbite quotes. I mean, that guy was just full of them. And if anybody doesn't know, he was the kind of a partner to Warren Buffett. Was unbelievably wealthy when he passed away not too long ago. But one of the things that he said was, watching costs is really, really important. And that's a really big theme throughout a lot of the founders, is being really, really careful on what you spend your money on, not wasting it. Because a lot of companies go out of business, and they bought a very expensive software and couldn't really afford it, but they thought they could monetize around it, and then they couldn't, and they go out of business because of it. Or, they hire too quickly in kind of business and hire 3 and 4 people when really they probably should have either done it on their own or only hired one. So that's a big theme out there. I think one of the quotes, and I don't remember who said it, was if you watch your pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. And I mean, that's a great way to be thinking about it. So that's a big theme. And then I think there was a couple that were very meaningful in terms of me timing the business that I timed. There's a book called The Fish That Ate the Whale about the largest banana grower in the world. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was saying there are very few times that you find, and he was talking about property, but find your property and it's for sale, and it may never be for sale again in this lifetime, and you have to capitalize on it, and maybe you have to take a huge loan out to be able to afford it, but because you've been in this long enough that property will be very, very important to your business. And that kind of is a little bit on the timing piece of this. And then Elon Musk has a quote, and I won't nail it exactly, so I'll just give a kind of a synopsis. But he said, there are times in life where you find a problem that whether or not you can make it financially viable, you just need to go right at it and see. And I think both of those things kind of went into when I thought about when should I open this business. The timing was, well, right now, because within a year, I'm hoping that the market is starting to come back, and I've built up enough of a reputation within the Denver market to be able to capitalize on that. And I think would be a very important step.
What is your favorite? Do you have a favorite episode
Um,
out of 300?
right. I'm trying to remember
You
all of
told
them.
me that like the Trader Joe's founder was pretty interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah, I
And then
really
also,
like.
it wasn't Crocs. Who was it that almost turned around and was asking questions of the interviewer more than anything? Uh, I don't know, but yeah, you there've been a few that you've been like, man, that person was just really interesting. I personally listened to the Estee Lauder, um,
It's a
or,
good one.
or the woman who started Estee Lauder, and it was just wild, like her dedication to customer acquisition from the get-go, and like how she was essentially selling her, these products every single place she was at. Didn't matter where she was in the grocery store, she's like pitching, she's like, try this cream, and like everybody's a customer. And just the amount of like passion about getting the product out, and never saying no to, or never taking no for an answer, of trying to get it into department stores and getting turned down multiple times, and then, going and getting it into a competitor and selling it out, and then going back to the other place and saying, guess what I just did, like those kinds of things. Like, it was just, and that's another woman on the line of who was a little older when she started. I think
Yeah, it's
she was like in her,
absolutely true.
yeah.
Um, it reminds me that you bring up a great point. One of the things in the Estee Lauder podcast, and it was a big theme in other ones as well, is being relentlessly persistent
Hmm.
and not stopping ever. Not even when you're 70 years old. You have to keep going always. And I think that's a really important kind of thing that I heard in a lot of different founders' creation of the business to all the way to the end, is they were just relentlessly persistent about moving forward.
Yeah. That's what you have to be this weekend at Javelina, and that's what I have to be as well. So
Absolutely. It'll
I
be
think
going
that's
through my mind.
good place to end it. But thanks for sharing your story, and let us know, what you guys think about, or if you have any questions for Graham. And it's kind of exciting to see the evolution of the company from right now. And yeah, we'll probably revisit this in a year and have very different conversation going on, and that'll be really cool. So
It will be
thanks
really
for
cool.
joining. Let us know if you have questions, and feel free to share the episode. But we'll be back next week with something kind of back in the mainstream, hiring or job seeking realm. And until then, take care.